Hello everybody and welcome. I'm Matt, Senior Client Success Manager for White House Custom Color. And before we get started chatting with Renee today, I just have a few announcements for you. If you're not following along and subscribe to our WHCC YouTube, make sure and do that so you get notified of cool events like we're doing today. Follow along on Instagram at WHCC Pro, and for any product questions you have, hit up WHCC.com. If you do have questions during the broadcast today, make sure and put them into the chat. And if you're watching this on the rewind, if you put them into the comments, we know how to track Renee down, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions for you. So, thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. You were in town last night and spoke for our local Twin Cities group, which was fantastic. And I was just talking to Renee before we got started. I had created content for the live, and then after last night, I created a whole nother page. So you're actually in luck. We're going to be going live for at least 4 hours today. So grab a comfortable chair and a cup of coffee. Okay, just joking. So Renee Bowen, wonderful business coach, wonderful human being, fantastic photographer. Tell everybody who is following along today that maybe doesn't know who you are a little bit more about yourself, where you're from and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm based outside of Los Angeles in the suburbs there. I've been in LA for about 30 years, which is odd because clearly I am not old enough to have lived anywhere.
You moved when you were 6 months old?
Yeah. Now, I'm born and raised in South Louisiana, so very small town, graduated from LSU, you know, the whole thing, lived in New Orleans for a stint, and on a whim decided to move to LA when I was 25 with no job, nothing, just left. And I've been there ever since because I met my husband in a bar 2 months later, and he's an actor. So we've been there ever since. I have 3 grown kids, which is crazy, a 26-year-old and then 2 24-year-olds. I have twins.
Wow.
And I specialize in high school seniors. I have since 2007. I've been in business longer than that and been doing photography longer than that, but seniors, I got serious about it around 2007. I do some headshots and branding too, because my husband's an actor, so.
Right, it's kind of a requirement.
Yeah, he has it pretty easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's your photography business. Talk to us about your coaching business, because that's a really big piece of who you are now.
Yeah, I fell into that. I mean, I have a bachelor's in psychology, so I always say that that's kind of like my first love. I always thought that I was gonna end up with a master's and maybe even a PhD and, you know, work with adolescents. And that was my intention, was to be a therapist for teenagers, basically, right? When I was going to school. And then when I moved to LA, I was like, I'm not really sure I want to do that anymore. I went to massage therapy school. I got really deep into all of the new age self-development stuff. Like I was listening to Tony Robbins CDs.
Oh, wow.
On my Walkman.
Nice.
In the 90s.
How did you keep that from skipping?
Yeah, no, it was a lot. Like I remember specifically too, like I had the whole, I found him just recently when I was cleaning out my garage, and it was really fun. And I found the workbook, which was really cool because he had you write out like all of these goals, and I've accomplished them. Like it was really fun to look back on. It was a fun find just recently. But anyway, so I've always been like interested in all of that, right? But I never thought that I would be a coach or a mentor or anything like that. But photographers started to come to me originally for business, right? Because I did build a successful business. I sell products and full service and made really good money doing it. And I love marketing. Like marketing is kind of like my love language, I think. Like, I just love it. So photographers started coming to me and asking me, like, how are you doing this? And how are you getting these sales? And how do you seem to market so easily? That kind of stuff. So sure, I'll tell you. So I mentored. I would do like in-person mentoring. I worked with certain organizations at times and just dabbled in it for a little bit. And I started to realize that a lot of what they were coming to me for was really more than just business coaching.
Right.
Like, yes, I could teach you how to do these things, and not even just like how I do them, because it's not one size fits all. Like, yes, I will be transparent with you and show you my pricing and how I structure things, but what it comes down to is, does it work for you and your life and your business? And so what I found was, especially not only the women, but a lot of the women who came to me really were needing a life coach, because it was a lot of, I can't get out of my own way, I seem to be stuck, why am I repeating these patterns? that kind of stuff. And that is like super interesting to me. So I decided to go back, get certifications in these things, because I feel like I do have a natural tendency for it. Like I'm always the therapist in the group of friends, right? People always would come to me with their problems. But I felt like, no, I want some actual tools to really be able to help people effectively and efficiently. So I did go get my certifications in life coaching and neurolinguistic programming, NLP, hypnosis, which kind of goes along with that, and some other certifications too. Like I feel like I'm always learning. You know, that stuff especially is super interesting to me. Yeah. So that's how I fell into that. And so I've been doing coaching one-on-one and in group programs now for probably about 10 years or so. Okay. I would say, yeah. I love it. I didn't expect to love it as much, but I really, really love it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And what what I love about what you do, and especially after hearing your presentation last night, which, you know, just so everybody knows, was an hour and a half, but it could have been days of information and all the research and the tools that you gave everybody on how to work through these things instead of, you know, we've all heard it before. You know, you go to a platform presentation, it's just raise your prices and raise your prices and raise your prices and, you know, all these things. That's not helpful.
Yeah.
You know, there, like you said, there's so many more things that go along with these roadblocks that people put in their way. And that's why we name this, you know, Reframing Your Roadblocks today, because if you can't work through those things, you are going to be on this same cycle forever.
Yeah.
And it's not going to change.
Yeah.
So can you, in your words, describe a roadblock? And I know that there's probably a fairly simple description, but in your terminology, the way that you work with people, like what is a roadblock?
Right. So it's that, well, it's where you feel stuck, right? So there's a few, I think. The things that I see the most of, I would say, are when it comes to raising prices, like you said, or understanding how to actually price yourself, or really just even looking at your numbers. Like, you'd be surprised at how many photographers don't even really know their numbers, right? Like, we had that conversation. So that's a big one because it's triggering, right? So if you feel triggered by looking at your numbers and really knowing all about that so that you can even set sustainable prices, that's kind of a sign that there's something going on there that's deeper. And it isn't helpful to tell someone in that place to just raise your prices, because it's not going to work, right? Like, yeah, even if you gave them the exact roadmap, do exactly this, if it doesn't feel good to that person and they can't get past those unconscious, like, you know, programs that are installed, they're not going to be able to do it in a way that feels good, because our businesses are really a reflection of how we feel. Especially, like, most of us are solopreneurs. You know, we're the outward face of our business, and we have to be the accountant, we have to be the social media manager, and we have to, you know, create content and all that stuff that everybody hates to do, because everyone hates it.
Right.
And it's like, oh, I just want to be a photographer.
Right.
You know, but right now, you know, you do have to wear all of these hats. And it is overwhelming. So a big roadblock that I see is the shutdown, basically, right? We have really amazing, creative, spicy brains. A lot of us like to do all the things all at once, and we have a lot of interests, and it feels overwhelming to have to do all of these things. And so instead of it, it's just too much, you just shut down, right? So then you get into that place of feeling stuck and fight or flight all the time. Yeah,
totally. So with roadblocks, like I have down here, are they situational? Can they be imposed by others? Is it a product of your environment? Like, where do these things come from? Or is the answer just yes?
Well, no. I mean, I think it varies. But, I mean, in general, right, it's our unconscious mind. Okay, so our unconscious mind is, we have to really think about it like a 7-year-old, because it kind of is us as a child. Your unconscious mind is always going to pull you back to safety, because its only job is to keep you alive. That's it. Like, it's literally built in safety mechanism, okay? So like I was talking about last night, if you were being chased, we want that to happen, right? If you were being chased by a bear or a tiger, you would want the blood to run from your head to your arms and legs to make you fast. You would want the adrenaline to rush and the cortisol to rise so you could get away. Right. You would want those things to happen in that situation. But what happens mostly now is that anything that you try that is new or different or scary, it is perceived by your unconscious mind as danger because you've told it that it is, right? It's scary. That emotion rises, the cortisol rises, and you get into fight or flight, even in something as simple as, here's my pricing, sending an invoice, that kind of thing, right? Because what happens is when you're running from that bear and you're fast, all that blood is running out of your brain, so you get fast, but you get dumb. And you're not thinking.
You get fast, but you get dumb.
Because you're not critically thinking. You're just like in survival mode, literally. So if you're always in survival mode when you're thinking about your pricing, how comfortable is that going to be to like sit in front of somebody and say, okay, so what are you guys thinking about today? Are you going to go with this package or this package? Like, you can't control the sales session at all because you can't control yourself. You're not regulated. So you really need to regulate your nervous system, right? But to answer your question, most of this programming comes from childhood, like before the age of 7, because it's the unconscious mind's job to soak in everything, like to keep you safe. Unfortunately, it sucks in a lot of stuff that's not good.
Right.
And a lot of us have big traumas. Some people have little traumas, but like even something small could have been perceived by the unconscious mind as a big trauma. And it gets stuck there.
Yeah.
So now we kind of need to look back and go back to that source if you can.
So just to clarify, because I think this is so interesting, a lot of the fears that the unconscious mind is creating for us as adults have been there since we were 0 to 7.
Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
A lot of it, because like think about it, right? Like if you were brought up and you were told things like money doesn't grow on trees, it depends on a lot on how we were brought up. And I would venture to say that most of us, especially over a certain age, I'm Gen X, so
right, me too.
We were feral. And we kind of had to raise ourselves. But, this happened even to younger people. Now I think that like my kids and, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, it's going to be a little bit different because we know more. We're a little bit more emotionally stable, I think, because we're trying to work through our stuff as adults, right? But growing up, most of us did hear things like that. Right. Money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work really hard for it. You got to work really hard for your money. Yep. But that's not necessarily true. I know a lot of people who barely work and make millions of dollars. Right. So we can reframe that, but you kind of have to look back and see, like, is this really my story? Like, or was I programmed against my will, basically, as a child? Totally. And it's not like a nefarious thing most of the time. Like, your parents thought that they were just doing what they were programmed to do, what they believed. And they were raised by an older generation who was even more hardcore about that, right?
Right, exactly.
So we just need to, I think, look at that honestly. That's the first part. And that's usually the hardest part, too, for a lot of people, because sitting with it is very uncomfortable.
It is. And you said something last night, too, like when it starts to feel icky.
Yeah.
You know that you're getting somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, if you feel triggered. I always say that. Like, if this is triggering for you and it's like, oh, I really don't want to talk about that. I don't want to feel that way. Like, you get that little tinge of, it could be fear, it could be anxiety. I mean, like, I've had anxiety my whole life, so that's my sort of like, I can tell, like, when I'm having like, oh, that's interesting, Right. But that's the other part of it too, is that it's a trigger, and I think it's also an opportunity if you choose to look at it that way, because it's an opportunity for you to then look at it with honesty and go, okay, I'm kind of ready to let this piece go. I think I'm ready to like rework this and take some agency and get back into this place of empowerment so that we're not so reactive. Right. Because a lot of people just live in a reactive state.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly. So I know that this is a huge question, but to reframe some of those things and those roadblocks and go back and like you said, I'm ready to let this go. Like, what are some beginning steps?
Yeah.
Because we can all learn from that. Doesn't matter who's listening today.
Absolutely. I think we all have work to do, right? Like, we're humans. We're never going to stop learning or growing, I hope, right? At least I don't want to. And, and just when you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm over that, it's like, oh yeah, there's still a little bit of stuff,
it's still there.
Like, that was definitely my thing. I thought I was like super cocky about it. I had been through therapy, and then I had to look at raising prices, and I wanted to throw up when I thought about going into a sales session.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, well, okay, there's still some worth issues happening, and let's go back and look at that. So there's a variety of ways that you can do it. I always ask people, when I work with coaching students, obviously, like, I want to find out what's going to work best for them. And there's a lot of suggestions, there's a lot of things that I can offer, but they're not going to do any of them unless it is doable for them, unless it feels good for them. So, for me, things like journaling, that's like my go-to, because I'm like a writer at heart. Like I express myself better in writing than any other format, because I can think about it and I can be precise with what I want to say. Yeah. And so I journal, and I just tell people, like, just start brain dumping, like just whatever comes to mind, right? Like almost like free-flowing sort of like stuff. That can be very helpful. I really believe in meditation and hypnosis. I know a lot of people, don't think that they can meditate because they feel like they have to do it in a certain way or whatever, but that's why I like hypnosis, because you don't really have to pay attention. You're literally just listening to a track where I'm talking to your unconscious mind. So a lot of my coaching students get to a place where they will just listen to a hypnosis track while they're editing or while they're cleaning the house. Like, you don't have to be in a place of rest. You just shouldn't be driving a car, right? Just in case. Yep. But you can technically listen to it whenever, because it's getting into your unconscious. It's like a subliminal thing, basically. I also lay my hypnosis tracks over binaural beats, which are also another thing that you can use just in general. You can go on Spotify and search up binaural beats. Yeah. That's a really good nervous system regulator as well, just to kind of get you in a good state. Okay. There's exercise, right? Moving your body, and like, there's so many different things and modalities and strategies that you can do, but what matters is what works for you, because that's the only thing that's going to work. Right? Yeah,
you have to embrace that and believe that is going to be the path.
You have to experiment.
Yeah, for sure. So you've already touched a little bit on this, Renee, but for the core pieces of coaching, when you're starting to work with somebody, in a few minutes ago, you mentioned having the tools.
Yeah.
That it takes to be able to get to a place where people understand this is the path, and that they believe that, and you're going to be able to do this step forward. But what are the core pieces for you when you're working with somebody?
Well, so like most of the people, and it's not just photographers that I work with creatives of all kinds, So the first thing, usually people will come to me for clarity. It's kind of, they're in a place of feeling stuck. Maybe they need help with their marketing, their messaging, or raising their prices. There's something kind of specific that's going on that leads them to believe, like, I need to reach out for some help. So for me, no matter where they are in their business, whether they've been in business for 20 years or they're just new to business, we're going to start with like a couple of foundational pieces, which is like really understanding their purpose and their why. Okay. And that has been thrown around a lot because it's a trigger word.
Yeah, to the overuse side. Yes.
Know your why, right? Well, we can thank Simon Sinek for that. Like, I love Simon, if you're watching. Oh my God. Fangirl, come on my podcast. I think that his teaching on that is really amazing. And he has a great YouTube about the golden circle and like how people buy why you do what you do and not what you do. Yeah. Okay, so I started diving into that probably well over 10 years ago. And when I do this with photographers, I really believe this is a foundational piece, because most photographers will come to me and they have even done this work, even with maybe some other coaches, and they'll say like, well, my why is that I make people feel confident. And I'm like, that's not a why. That's an outcome. That's great that you do that. Why do you like to make people feel confident? I don't know. Like, that's where I want to go with you. I want to go like way deeper with that, because your purpose, when I tell that to people, I mean like your purpose here on this planet, not your why about what you do as a photographer, because you're not just a photographer. Okay? So when you are connected, because you've really been living your why, the truth is like you've been doing it. But it's like us taking out a highlighter and just highlighting it and being intentional with your why. When you are able to put it into a statement like a why statement to this so that this, then you're able to connect with it in a way. You can look at it on a sticky note every day and remind yourself, right? And then you can develop your mission statement, your elevator pitch. All your marketing really comes from really understanding like your why. Like why do you get up in the morning? Like why is it that you want to do this? The deeper level to it. So like when I was doing mine, for instance, because this can get a little confusing. When I was doing mine, my why is, to create new and innovative ideas that are challenging, so that it challenges the status quo and so that it empowers other people to be their true authentic selves, basically. That's essentially what my why is. I had to go back to me as a child, me growing up. I've always been that person. I always wanted to be an early adopter. I'm always going to have the first phone, the newest phone. When ChatGPT came out, I joined that day. I paid for the Plus as soon as I could pay for it. Yeah. I'm not that techie, you know what I mean? But like, I'm an early adopter. I love being first, like Ricky Bobby. If you're not first, you're last. Like that's totally me. I like being innovative in that way. I also I've always been that person who wanted to stand out, even in high school. I was always wearing weird stuff. Like, I came from a very, very small town where you listen to, top 40 classic rock. That's what you listened to in the late 80s, right? Well, it wasn't called classic rock then, but you know what I mean. And I was the one listening to the Beatles and REM and Depeche Mode and all of the I was the goth girl, right? And everybody was like, what's wrong with her? In this really small little...
I don't see you as the goth girl.
I was an OG goth girl too.
Really?
Yes, because it was the 80s. And so I've never been I'm very much into the non-conformity, right? And so my why, that has nothing to do necessarily, right, with photography or coaching or being a parent, but I express that in everything that I do. And when you are connected, so like in my photography, I express that by helping my clients be their authentic selves, like letting them know it's okay. You want to wear that? Let's wear that. That's going to look better because it's really you, right? So my marketing will attract that client as well, who wants to stand out and be unique and not shoot the same pictures that everybody else has. And it also, translates in my coaching as well. I tend to attract photographers who do like to think outside the box and who are willing to look into their human design and look into these different aspects that I utilize in my coaching to get this deeper self-awareness.
That's so cool. And if I can just summarize a little bit to make sure that I understand, so everybody that's listening understands. You are going layers deep with people, and you're getting an answer and you're asking a question. And you're getting an answer and you're asking a question, and down to get to this core. Yeah. And then once your client understands that is truly what they're interested in, it makes the rest just fall in place.
Right. So what you're talking about is those layers of questions. So you start really simple, and you can do this on your own, but it is hard to get to like the deep layer of the onion by yourself, because it's uncomfortable. You kind of have to be a little uncomfortable. Like, no growth really happens out inside of that comfort zone, because that's just your unconscious keeping you safe and cozy. It's like, no,
that 7-year-old again.
We don't want to do that. Yeah. So it's up to us to get in the driver's seat and realize, like, okay, no, I really kind of want to go there. And it is a little bit easier to do when you're working with somebody who does know what questions to ask.
Right.
But you start off really simple, like, why do I want to be a photographer? Okay, well, I like making, I love taking photos. I love making people feel good. Let's say it's a portrait photographer. Why do you like making people feel good? Because I think that's important. Why do you think that's important? Well, I never really felt seen as a child. Then you're getting somewhere. Okay, well, why do you think you never felt seen as a child? My parents were busy. They worked all the time. Okay, we're going to keep going down that. It's basically a little therapy, right? Because we got to go back 100%. And see, like, what were you lacking? What were you missing? What was that missing piece for you? Because that's probably why you're doing what you're doing today. And the outcome is that, yes, you make people feel confident and safe, but let's put that into a statement. Let's craft a marketing message with that, so that you feel so connected to it that it just oozes out of everything you do.
Right. And I love how when you're talking about that, the business becomes the footnote of it. And when you're prior to that, it's this big gleaming thing that you're trying to wrap your head around. But when you get, I'm following you right now, like that mission of the business becomes just this little extra thing at the end because you have all of this designed.
Right.
And you know the truth to it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, because it's just this deeper sense of self-awareness that a lot of people just either don't want to do for a lot of reasons, right? Because it could be uncomfortable, or they've never just even really given themselves the space and time to do it.
Right.
That it could be as simple as that, right? You know, a lot of people wake up in their 40s and why am I doing what I'm doing?
Right.
Like, is this even my path? It might not be,
right.
But life is too short to live for other people. You know, I really believe that we deserve to give ourselves that gift of time, right? On our deathbed, what are you going to be? You're not thinking about, you know, things like, well, I wish I would have charged this client more money, or I wish I would have done this. You wish for more time.
Right.
So use the time wisely, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my questions, and we've already dove into this quite a bit, but I want to keep going. How is your business a reflection of how you feel?
Yeah.
How is that directly connected?
Well, I mean, I think that it definitely kind of, if you have beliefs, let's just say this, because, you know, we are energetic beings. That is science. It's not just woo. I am very, very woo. I'm the first person to
I told
mention
Kelly
that.
the title of your podcast last night, and she loved it.
Yeah. Tried and true with a dash of woo.
Right.
Because that's me. That's literally me. I'm going to help you with strategy, but I'm also going to like introduce some of this universal law and magic of manifestation, because I do believe in that.
Yeah.
And energy. But in general, we are energetic beings. We emit a frequency. It's been studied. It's a thing, right? You know, you walk into a room sometimes, you meet somebody for the first time, and you get a vibe. Like, it's a good or a bad. You know. That's what I'm talking about. So if you, you know, your feelings really can influence the thoughts. So the thoughts that we have about like 60,000 plus thoughts a day. We can't really control all of those thoughts that come in, but we can control which ones stick around. And a lot of us have just a lot of nasty inner saboteur thoughts, because that's just old programming and all of that kind of stuff. So having those kind of thoughts install as beliefs will make you feel a certain way. So if you believe things like, no one's ever going to pay me $3,000 for a portrait session, I can't raise my prices. People aren't spending money right now. In this economy, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So if you are consuming a lot of that information in your world, you're going to start to believe it, and it's going to affect your energetic output. It's going to be a lower vibrational output, all right? And then so everything you do in your business is going to reflect that.
Yeah.
How are you going to approach a sales session if you really believe, like, they're not going to pay me that?
Right.
You're not going to go into it assuming the sale, guiding them through the process, being excited about showing them. You're not going to be excited, right? You're going to be living in fear, basically. So that's why I say it starts with you and the way that you feel, because everything that we do and everything that we consume, whether it's media of any kind, is going to affect our frequency. A lot of people would even venture to say that the foods you eat are going to do that. Like, you go there's a lot of foods that will affect your frequency, a lot of, you know, substances, right? So you can go pretty deep with it. But the idea is that you want your clients to feel good.
Right.
And you want the outward face of your business to make people feel good and to feel comforted and to feel taken care of, especially if you're doing a high-touch service, like a full-service business. But if you are feeling fearful and dysregulated all the time, you can't do that.
Right. So in this day and age, distraction is a major, major thing.
Yeah.
I find myself distracted a lot, not necessarily by outward things, but internally. How do you work with that? How does a person, you know, I can remember being at a conference several years ago, and they talk about taking off and landing. Every time you take off and land, you know, you're distracted constantly. And I really try, but sometimes I'm not so successful at it. Like, how do you help with that?
Yeah.
Have that outside distraction all the time?
It's very common, obviously. Like, we live in a world that fosters that, you know. We have like a dopamine hit like in our hand constantly as well. Like, but it's not just the phone, like you said. It's those internal. So some people just have, and this is fascinating to me, like some people have a very intense, rich, verbal inner dialogue. And some people don't have any. Like, there are people who don't have an internal dialogue. I don't know how they function, honestly. Like, how is that even possible? Like, I have a constant inner monologue.
Yeah.
And I find that most people do, right? And so it can get a lot, though, like what you're saying, because you want to, like, squirrel, you know, it's easy to get distracted by that. It's easy to, like, get overwhelmed by that and all the thoughts. The first thing is to just become aware of it. That's really a major step that seems so simple, because it is. But a lot of people won't even like do that without being prompted. So you need to be aware of the thoughts that are coming in, and so that you can catch the ones that are not ideal. So that is kind of the first step in that process. There's a lot of different strategies that you can use for, like, as far as, like, you know, setting up your environment for success, let's say. And this, like everything else, is going to have some level of experimentation involved, because what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa.
Right.
So when I'm working with a coaching student, that's why I pull their human design chart. That's why I get a lot of intake from them, and, like, what does your day look like? Are you best productive in the morning or at night? Like, when do you feel most energized? When do you have the most internal natural energy? You need to work with it instead of trying to work out of it. So that's the big factor, that a lot of people, they take a lot of these courses and things like that, and they're like, well, I should be doing this. Well, I should be doing this. But you're not going to do it long term. You might do it for, like, you know, 2-3 weeks, and then you're going to fall off the wagon because your unconscious programming is going to pull you back. Like, this is not what we want to do. So yes, you can change those habits, but isn't it easier to work with what you already have?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first part of it, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
For sure. So if we go back to, we'll pause that for a second. And if we go back to the world of photography and the in-person sales and the fear surrounding that, and especially the closing of the sale.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that I've talked to and that we've talked to over the years that fear just, it's enormous at the end.
Yeah.
And especially if you're building these large sales, which we hope that everybody is, you know, to deliver that message at the end is terrifying. How?
How do you do it?
How do you do
it? Yeah. Well, I think that I like all of this, right? And I'll get to, like, the actual sales part of it in a second, but I always tell people that you are selling all the time. Right? I mean, if you're a photographer and you're charging any kind of money for anything, you are in sales. So just get used to that, first of all. Like, it can be an ugly word if you choose to allow it to be, and that's programming. So if you've got some programming around sales is slimy, that does need to be worked on, right? So that's that part that needs to be addressed, looked at, and rewired in a lot of different ways. And again, this looks different for everybody. But at the heart of it, you are selling the whole time, right? You know, from the time that they find you online, from the time that, you know, you were on a session with them. When I'm out shooting with somebody, I'm talking about that album from the get-go. Like, they hear about my albums on my website. They hear about it in the first inquiry email. They hear about it on the phone call. They hear about it. They hear about it on Instagram. Yes. They hear about it everywhere. Like, they know. So, like, by the time they sit down with me for that sales session, they're getting an album.
Right.
I know they're getting an album.
Asked.
They're getting an album. They know they're getting an album because it has been embedded. And that is a sales technique. It's NLP as well. Like, you're going to embed some things in the way that words are important. The way that you use the words are important. So a lot of people get tripped up in the sales session, though, because what I see the most happen is that they lose control of the sales session because it's so scary and fearful. Like, you know, I always tell my coaching clients, I don't let people drive. Like, no one's ever touching the computer. That's my job. Like, I know a lot of photographers will just hand that computer over and let them choose. No, you're not an order taker. You're guiding them. This is your specialty, right? So you set the tone. They walk in, I always sit to the left of them because it's psychologically an unconscious trigger. That's a little sales tip. Just in general, you should be sitting to, like, their left if you can. And when they come in, I give them the framework, like this is how it's going to roll out. You guys have a seat, get comfy. There's usually fresh baked cookies because I'm going on all the senses here.
Yeah.
And you want to engage them, obviously make them feel safe. And then I let them know, like, we're going to look at the slideshow first. Don't even think about making choices right now because you're just going to enjoy the slideshow. And then after that, we're going to do a first pass. This is not your final answer. Like, I walk them through what's going to happen and how it's going to go. And so I'm in control of that situation the entire time.
Yeah.
Some people just lose control of it, and that's what I work with them most on, is how to stay in control of it and how to get back in control if you do lose control. Because the thing that always happens usually, especially with the senior portraits, is the dad. That's the thing I hear the most.
Those
is like,
dads.
the dad came, and I'm like, I love when dads come. And they're like, why? So you do have to be ready for things like that. But as far as like the closing, that last thing of, okay, well, how would you like to pay, right? I have an order form, a physical order form that I use. And I think this makes it a little bit easier too, because as we're going through, obviously I'm kind of writing everything down. And yes, I'm going to put it in my CRM and I'm going to have it nice and pretty for them. But I'm handwriting it in person. And I think that does, for me anyway, it makes a difference. And I feel like it makes it a little bit easier for people. Once it's all written up and I total everything and I take my phone out and do my little math, and make sure it's right, because I'm not a math girl. Like, I don't trust it in my head. I'm definitely using my calculator. But I have it all written out, and there's a disclaimer at the bottom that says sales are final, and they sign it, right? And I think that definitely helps in a lot of different ways, because I just kind of put it back. I'm like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. You got this, you got this. This is going to be designed. You're going to see a proof of it. I kind of go over the whole thing. Here's your total. And how would you like to pay? Kind of credit card. Would you like to do a check or a credit card? Like, what works best for you? That's easy. It's that easy, right? But getting yourself to that place, that's the programming. If you find it like me when I used to want to throw up, right? I literally would break out in hives before asking people for money. A lot of this is working on the programming and reframing it, but also doing it. You have to do it, right? Because the doing of it and the successful doing of it builds confidence.
Right.
So you have to push through it as well, right? But you definitely need to find out why, because most of us humans just love to equate our worth with money.
Right.
So if you have any issues with not feeling worthy for any reason, you're going to equate it to, I'm not worthy of money.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Wow.
So.
Did
that answer your question?
That was wonderful. That went far beyond the answer to my question. That was fantastic, because and I'm guilty of it myself. Looking at a scenario like that. Okay, I can't close. All right, so let's figure out the answer to that, where it is a plethora of answers and reasons and work that has to be done to be able to get, like you said, to that place where you are okay with presenting. Here's what we're going to do, and this is the total. Would you like to pay credit card or check today? And being okay with that and not having to throw up at the same time.
And here's the thing, you're going to do it scared.
Yeah.
You have to do it scared. Like, yes, you can work on it, but and that's why working with a coach is also a good thing, because you have support. Like, I have a lot of clients who will like call me before. Like, I'm like, okay, here's what you're gonna do, right? You're gonna go, before your clients get there, you're gonna get everything set up. I want you to take 5 minutes and I want you to get centered, and I want you to really get into your energetic field. Like, expand your field, take up space, own it. Look at those testimonials. Pull up your testimonial document. Look at all the awesome stuff that people said about you. You're amazing. You got this. Sometimes that's all you need, right? And so that's why coaching is so effective too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to bring this full circle before we're out of time here today. So last night, and you mentioned it a few minutes ago here, where we produce energy. And the energy that we put into the world is what we get back, into the universe we get back. And from just a personal story, so I spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania doing volunteer work, and I can remember having a conversation one night, and I was saying, I'm getting so much more out of this experience than what I'm able to give back. And I can remember Giselle Fetterman telling me, she's like, no, it's a mirror of what you're putting in, and that's what you're getting back. And I said, no, I'm getting so much more from this. And she's like, Matt, you're not listening. And it truly, it's true. You can manifest those things.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. So if you are thinking that, like you were saying, if the economy's bad, people are not going to spend, I'm not going to get these clients, that's exactly what's going to happen.
You're going to find proof of whatever you're looking for.
Yes, exactly.
You really, really are, because of the reticular activating system in our brain. It's a thing that filters it. So you can decide what you want to look for.
Yeah.
You can find proof of $10,000 sales all over as well. You absolutely can, right? And we also, another thing that happens a lot with photographers is when you do see that, right? So if you are online or if you're in any groups and you see people talking about how much money they made, and your first instinct is, must be nice.
Right. I can never do
You
that.
got some programming built in there, right? That's a sign, because that is a scarcity mindset, but an abundance mindset says, that's awesome. If she can, I can.
Right.
So use that as inspiration. Use that as your proof until you can find it for yourself. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I didn't go right out of the gate making $10,000 sales, but I make them now. So you really have to decide. It's a choice.
Right. So this last line in here, I just want to read, and then we'll close out here today. And I love this from last night. Change the way you speak to yourself and watch what happens. Because we all have a way of speaking down to ourselves, me included.
Absolutely.
And when you change that narrative and you start supporting yourself the way you would support a best friend,
Yep.
wow, things can be fantastic.
Absolutely. We are our worst enemies most of the time. We crack the whip on ourselves so badly, especially if you had a lot of that programming as a kid, right? But it is up to us to reparent that little us. It really is. That inner child work is really powerful. And you can look at it through that lens of working with your unconscious mind, but it's really all that same thing, right? Because you deserve to be happy. We have a lot of people-pleasing stuff built in, but that's also a trauma response.
Yeah.
So it's really the words we say to ourselves matter a lot. So try and catch yourself. Sometimes some people have a really nasty inner saboteur, really nasty, and it has such long-lasting effects, like not even just on your mental health, but your physical health.
Right.
And if you are having a hard time with that and managing that, like if someone is listening, having that, first of all, know that you're not alone. Like, this is actually something I hear a lot of, and you can rewire it. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, but self-love is the most powerful thing you can give yourself. It's a gift, because when you do this for yourself, when you take the time to work on yourself in that way and change that, you're going to be a better parent. You're going to be a better partner. You're going to be a better friend, outside of your business. It's better for everybody. So if you have a hard time doing it for yourself, then at least do it for somebody else first, because most of us, it's a little bit easier for us to do that.
Yep.
And then you're going to start seeing the benefits of it.
Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic. I love when we're talking and the cameras just disappear.
Yeah.
That way it was great. So for everybody watching along today that wants to learn more about you, where can they find you for your website, Instagram, all the places? Where are you at?
I'm pretty much just Renee Bowen across the board. ReneeBowen.com is my main site. I have ReneeBowenCoaching.com as well. It's like education stuff, but Renee Bowen on Instagram, Renee_Bowen on TikTok. I'm on TikTok a lot. So yeah, I'm always available for DMs on Instagram. If you have any questions about anything, it's a good place to find me.
Awesome.
And my podcast.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Thank
This
you.
has been awesome. I've
Always
loved this
love having
conversation. And thank you for joining us today. Just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the WHCC YouTube, make sure and do that. Follow along on Instagram at WHCC Pro. And for any of your questions about all the awesome products we make here, check out WHCC.com. I'm Matt with Renee Bowen. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.